Hello.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the January 9th edition of Smarten Up. This is the second show of the year.
Second show of the year here
And
on Messianic Lamb Network.
on lamnetwork.tv.
School Pods Canada, Facebook page, and YouTube channel for Smarten Up.
We're everywhere.
Well, we want to reach as many of you as possible because we know that raising children, teaching children, just navigating the things families have to do is an exciting and sometimes a daunting task.
Daunting is for sure. You know, last night we had a great event out in Waterloo, Ontario. It was the education alternatives, really, school options, I think it was called. And it was an amazing turnout. There had to be well over 100 people that were there.
Yes. Well over that. And I have got to say that, at this point, it is parents in different communities who are passionate about the next generation are the ones who really initiate those kind of meetings.
Yeah.
We've had some here in Niagara Falls region, St. Catharines, Niagara Falls. This was in Waterloo. And I'm certain that there's other events. So if you have events, we would like to promote your event that provides parents with alternatives for education and all kinds of parenting advice and just giving you an idea of what is it that families are facing nowadays in our society and what are your options? What are the answers to some of the problems or questions that you may have?
So it was held at a fairly large church.
Yes.
And they had quite a building. And there were a number of different organizations that were represented there promoting a variety of things. There were a couple of Christian schools. There was some advocacy groups and people just trying to get the message out there that you don't have to just idly sit back and accept what it is that we're having thrown at us. There was a couple of wonderful presentations. The keynote speaker was a professor. I think he was at
some point. I don't know if it's currently there at Laurier University.
Wilfrid Laurier. Okay. So He's a university prof, and he was speaking on the transgender issues and all kinds of things. I mean, it was a powerful presentation.
Well, he actually went beyond that. He just went, what are children facing in schools and how our schools really no longer seem to reflect the diversity of our community, and free speech is not really free speech anymore. And really, we know our society, and we've spoken about that in many shows that we've done, is our society is founded in our diversity, and we have lost the ability to value other opinions, value other people, points of view, and still live in unity and harmony with one another, and just learn to have dialogue with one another and appreciate what we bring to our society versus what divides us. And I think that was the emphasis of really the speech that he had, is that actually the title of his speech was education versus indoctrination. And really, when he looked up the definition in the dictionary of education and indoctrination, the definition is pretty much the same, which is really providing information to help guide someone's choices and views and so forth. But the thing is, the difference really is between education and not indoctrination is how open we are to different points of view, which is education, and how much do we want to guide someone's views, opinions, and thoughts in a specific point of view versus embracing that diversity. And so that's where indoctrination comes in. And really, I appreciate the fact that was defined for us, because by just definition in the dictionary, they look the same.
Yes, exactly. But the major distinction is do you want to receive this information? And with indoctrination, you're getting only one side of the story, and that is being presented as absolute truth. Now, we've been dealing with this for decades within the public school system. And the best example that I can think of is evolution. We have been told that evolution is fact. It is the only explanation for the origins of the planet and us and the universe.
Yeah.
And the whole creation account is absolutely forbidden. As a matter of fact, you worked as a high school teacher
Yeah.
in a science department one time, and you saw what happened to the poor people who suggested.
Yeah, well, the science teachers, sorry, our cat wants to join here. Well, and that's the thing. When I was first in teachers college, so that was quite a few years ago.
It was about 3 or 4 years ago. Mature student.
Yes. What happened is I was learning to be a math and science teacher. Those were my teachables for anyway, grade 7 to grade 12, so high school. And I was a new believer in God. That was just something new that I was exploring. And, but my love for science was still there. It did not change with my faith, really.
Yeah.
And so what happened to me was quite a shock to see that if you were a believer in God and in creation, that the other teachers in the science department who did not believe in that were quite hostile to you. And so for a moment there, I thought, do I really want to pursue this career as a science teacher in public school system with me believing in God? But really, the story that really stands out in my mind the most is when I actually finally started teaching. So I overcame that obstacle and I received my certification. Is when I was actually myself in science class teaching in high school, and I was teaching the cell theory, how every cell comes from pre-existing cell, and the cell is the smallest unit of life, and all. I'm not going to bore everyone with the science, but of course students want to know, and that's the thing. That's where education comes in, because it's exploring questions that we have and wanting to find out, learning things. And so I had a student in my class ask me, well, where did the first cell come from? If every cell comes from pre-existing cell, well, where did the first one come from? Right. And of course, I turned that back to my students, because I did not want to be the type of teacher that gives the answers without having them think and critically think and really go into their file system in their brain, find out what they know already. And of course, a few kids said, well, Big Bang, that's how everything started. And so that's how the first cell was created. And they thought I would continue with the lesson, but I said, well, what else? I stopped and I said, well, what else? Any other explanations? And the class got quiet. Don't try to get me quiet. The class got quiet, and I said, well, I'm sure there's more than one explanation of where everything came from, life and the cells that we are made of. And I heard a little whisper at the back of my class, way at the back. And this child said, God. And I said, I didn't hear that. Could you please share what you just said? What's the explanation? And this child did not repeat. They thought I was going to be upset with them. That child refused to repeat what I asked. And another kid, of course, how they're always eager to help one another, said, he said God,
Yeah.
And I said, well, yeah, that is another explanation. I said, why do we have to only accept one and not the other? I said, it takes just as much faith to believe in one and the other. So it's your job to go and explore. What is it? What makes the most sense? What is it that you believe? Don't just stick to one explanation. Now, I have to tell you, though, not only that kid at the back of my class felt nervous, but I did, because I wasn't sure it was okay for me to say that God is a perfectly valid explanation of how life started. And so I think our education system has become indoctrination if we are afraid to say that there are different explanations to different phenomena in life. And I am advocate for us trying to return to that. And listen, I believe in God now, but I will still talk about evolution and what it says, you know. And you know what? I think that we should be able to say, I don't believe it because this doesn't make sense, or this makes sense. And that's why I believe this. We should be able to have this dialogue with one another.
Yeah.
And we don't. And this is why I believe that our education system has become indoctrination, because different points of view are shut down and they're not welcome to be spoken, even if that's the sincere belief of somebody who's part of that public system.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the themes last night was, how do we make the public school system serve the public once again? Well, when we are able to have open discussions and dialogues without being afraid to voice what we believe, what we think, and what makes sense to us, and disagree with one another.
But what happens is that the lie has to shut down all kinds of dialogue, because a lie, when contrasted with the truth, will never stand.
Right.
So you have to be able to shut off dissent. And it was Vladimir Lenin says, a lie told often enough becomes the truth.
Right. And we actually heard last night from a teacher in the Kitchener-Waterloo School Board who was fired. I forget what her name was. Anyway, she was fired because she said that she does not believe. I thought
more than two genders.
Yeah, it was just like the whole thing that's just like, she believes that there's two genders. And I thought it was also critical race theory. But anyway, her story was she just said, we shouldn't be teaching only one-sided kind of thing. And so she lost her job because there was complaints against her and all kinds of stuff. So she's involved in a lawsuit. But she said though she believed what she was doing was right, she was really afraid of what is going to cause her and cost her. And so she had to have this picture when she was doing online meetings and presentations of a lion, where she said, the truth is like a lion. You do not have to defend it. You just unleash it and let it defend itself. And I think
that was a quote from Augustine.
Right. And so I think we need to really be pursuing truth instead of being so busy of trying to funnel things the way we see and want and like and so forth. So that is what we discuss is the state of our public education system at this time. And the big surprise to everyone that the Catholic schools here in Canada are government sponsored, and so therefore they are public education.
Yeah, it was Bill Davis's parting gift as he was retiring from Premier in 1985. He allowed in Ontario the Catholic school system to be funded by the government. So of course, wherever you're getting your funding from is the drum that you have to march to. And so the Catholic school system is no different. They have to toe the official government line. And even though we technically have a conservative government, it's progressive conservative, which is an oxymoron.
Right.
That's kind of like saying military intelligence or something like that. But this government supposedly is conservative, and yet they have adopted every woke policy under the sun. Stephen Lisi is the education minister. He has reneged on every promise that the Ford government made in order to pull back the sex education curriculum. And they have allowed this absolute disaster to happen in our education system.
Yeah. And so we believe it's going to take a lot of effort to have this public school system serve the public once more. And that's why there's more and more meetings out there in the community to what are our alternatives? Because all of a sudden we find ourselves in a place where we've relied on that one system for so long that people don't even know that there's some Christian schools and private schools that people are aware of, but to a lot of people, that is just for the rich people. That is out of my reach.
Yeah.
And there was a great line that the keynote speaker said at the end
Mm-hmm.
of his speech. And I'm not saying that everybody should now go into debt just so they can get that expensive education for their child, because alternatives are being provided, including School Buys Canada. But he said, it is time now for us parents, the parents, to make really important decisions. And we know that it's inconvenient and it's uncomfortable and it's sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And we really have to sacrifice a lot in order for us to have that private education for our children. Even homeschooling is sacrifice, because one parent has to give up their income.
You're going to have to sacrifice your time. And there are many people who, listen, educating your children is hard. I was just on the phone with actually one of the parents who was there last night.
Yeah.
And her husband was there. I don't think she was there. So I was talking with her, and she said that, she's just finished homeschooling and her brain is dead.
And you know what? It takes a lot out of us.
Because math isn't her strong suit, and she's trying to teach her kid math. And
well, and the encouragement for homeschoolers was that, it's rewarding because we get to learn with our children. I will confess, I did not like history until I started teaching it in our homeschool, and I love it and enjoy it now. So it's a growing journey for the parents and the children. But the big thing is, the second part of that statement is, yes, so we have to sacrifice, but we at this point have to make the choice. Do we sacrifice our lives and the lifestyle we used to, or do we sacrifice our children's lives and their future? And really, that has become now the choice for parents. And it's an unfortunate choice, but we're here and we have to deal with the reality. Yeah, we have to make these choices. So I'm just excited, though, that parents are becoming aware, and really Canada has been a country with great education, with great public service, and that's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, Egerton Ryerson, who was I think he was a Presbyterian minister back in the 1800s, and he founded the public education system. As a matter of fact, the university I went to is named after him.
Right.
And listen, I'll tell you, it is a sad state of affairs where our education system has gotten to. But what Dr. Haskell said last night at the end of his talk was, it's going to require sacrifice no matter what you do.
You have to say what sacrifice.
Are you going to sacrifice yourself, or are you going to sacrifice your kid? And so that kind of led up to what I ended up talking about, because I also had the opportunity to share.
Yes.
And man, I got up and I talked about what Lenin said. Another one of his quotes is, "Give me 4 years to teach the kids, and the seeds that I have planted will never be uprooted."
Yeah.
And then I also spoke about what the communist plan to take over the United States. Yeah, it was the 45-point plan to take over, the communists take over the United States, as it was written in the U.S. Congress 61 years ago, back in 1963. And it said, point number 17 was, take over the public education system, take over the teachers' unions. And so you've got all of these people who are coming out with this radical gender ideology and all this other stuff, and they're pushing it because they already believe in the cause.
And it is radical because it's not based on science. And I have been sent articles about that there's some scientific backing to all this agenda. But really, when I've examined it from somebody who has science background from that point of view, what they were saying is there's nature versus nurture. And the nurture part is what's creating the gender ideology. And the nature is very clear about the chromosomes and all that.
Right.
But that is not, that's just one symptom of what is being taught that is not aligning with critical thinking, dealing with truth, reality, and so forth. And so that's why parents are trying to, it's ultimately, it's the parents' job and their responsibility, not job, it's responsibility for us to raise our children, to teach them in the values that we would like them to have, because we care for those children.
Right. And so, what I spoke about is that our kids are being sacrificed. And I even asked the question to the audience. I said, what is it going to take for us to wake up? Do our kids literally have to come home missing body parts before we snap out of this? Because there is a war on for our kids. They're not giving up. I was speaking with one of my mentors today, Dr. Michael Lake, who's out of Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah.
And we were on the phone, and he said the Lord asked him, he was in prayer time last year, and he said, the Lord asked him, what is it going to take?
Yeah.
And so Mike asked, well, what do you mean? He said, what is it going to take for my people to wake up? And this is the church we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so what I told
people who read the Bible are supposed to read the Bible.
Supposed to. But and this is what I shared last night, was that this has happened on our watch. We're the ones who allowed them to take over because we did nothing. They came in and kept pushing their agenda, and we just kept backing off. Well, it's not affecting me, whatever. And all of a sudden we arrive at the point where our kids are now being encouraged to, take puberty blockers and physically maim themselves.
Not only to mutilate themselves, but they're also being encouraged to come home and tell their parents they're wrong and what they're being taught.
So it's rebellion.
And so it is not. And this has been always on my heart. I know we're protesting against what's going on in our society because it is appalling in many, many ways.
Yeah.
But are we just raising a group of rebels for the next generation, or are we teaching what the values are and teaching them how to build and work towards something constructive, productive, and creative?
I just read an article today that the UN committee, or whatever it is, on transgenderism, it consists primarily, I think there's maybe 2 medical professionals in the entire bunch. Most of them are advocates and lawyers.
Well, and that's the thing. It's become more of opinion than fact-based, and it's very emotionally charged. And I think it's time to start going back to critical thinking and all and so forth. But really, what we really need to nurture is our child's heart. And I think you wanted today because, we'll confess, our family has issues that we kind of face as we're raising our teenager now.
Yep.
And one of the things that came is it has to do with the heart of the child that we're raising, and there was a certain lack of gratitude that we've noticed, and so we wanted to talk a little bit about that because that, last night we touched upon the fact that education should also be creating a sense of community, gratitude, and appreciating the people around us, the community and our society, versus finding differences and finding points to fight over.
Well, and, this is what the evil side does, is that it fosters hate, it fosters division.
Yeah.
Yeshua said that a house divided against itself cannot stand. And one of the reasons why the Christian church and the body of Messiah today is in the state that it's in is that, and I cover this in my book, is that you've got thousands of denominations around the world of everybody who's saying that they've got the right interpretation. They're the ones who know better. Their practices, their customs, their traditions, everything else.
There's just so much division.
Are the right ones. And yet Yeshua says very specifically in John 17, he says, I prayed that they may be one so that the world may know that you sent me. Yeah. So the body of Messiah has to be united, and we're the ones who lead the charge. I said, what has happened in the school system is our fault because we let it happen. I said, I said, you're going to sacrifice no matter what. And I kept alluding to what Dr. Haskell said, but I said, freedom is a lot easier to defend than to take back once you've lost it.
Right. And we've realized that it slipped away from us. So now it's a harder fight. Now it's a more drastic measures and really rolling up our sleeves and working harder. But we will not really create and build things if we don't have that sense of gratitude. And
the gratitude has to start in gratitude to God.
Absolutely.
Because where it starts from is that we as parents need to be thankful for our children.
Yes.
Even
though some days it's hard to be thankful, but we have to be, because you know what? Ultimately, they are blessed.
Well, we are thankful for them. We're not necessarily thankful for their behavior.
Right, and there's a difference.
we are commanded to love one another. That doesn't mean we have to like them all the time.
Well, or accept everything that
or
we do
how
or
close
say.
We love them. We can love people from a distance. So when it comes to our children, what did the scripture say? Psalm 127 says that they are a quiver. And we actually just watched a movie about this the other night by the Hendricks brothers that put out a lot of Christian movies. And the idea was that this family this couple who had 3 of their own kids, and they ended up adopting one too. And the struggles that they went through, and how they had a transformational experience through actually there was a program at church that they went through on kind of biblical parenting, kind of what we're giving you right now. But, you
Well,
don't have to sit in a group and go through the homework.
Well, and the thing is, I think that we really appreciate how many cases there are of grown-up children calling their parents after they've become parents themselves and say, now I appreciate what you've done.
Yeah.
Now I appreciate you. Now I appreciate, of course, if the parent has done their best, and
Yeah.
we don't always have to appreciate, because but there's got to
And
be
forgive me for the hell I put you through.
yeah. Well, but you know what? Even us asking our children for forgiveness because
Sure.
we're no one's perfect, and I love that about the movie that we watched, is that even this couple, it didn't start off their family the right way and God honoring type of way, but along the way they decided to course correct, and they decided, you know what, we didn't get it started right, but we're going to do our best right now with what we got. And I think this is, as a family, we have to have that point of view, and the fact that God is forgiven and God will help us get through those things, and just being thankful that God overlooks some of the things we say, do with ourselves, with our lives, and with our children even sometimes.
Yeah. So we need to be thankful, number one, that we have our children. And, there are many who are crying out there when they can't have children. I mean, if you look in the Bible, for instance, all of the women who couldn't have children, I mean, at one time, not having children was considered to be a curse. It was a disgrace.
Yeah.
Who was it? It was Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mother, who said that God has taken away my reproach. Reproach is a strong word. And this is how people were viewed in ancient and Middle Eastern society. Now, in Western culture, having kids is almost a burden now. And there's a badge of honor if we actually get rid of them, or if we become, if we don't have children.
Well, and the other thing is, I belong to a lot of Facebook groups that have to do with homeschooling, parenting, or just community groups, just the community group of moms. Right. And usually it's not the homeschool groups or, the parenting. It's usually the community group where at the end of every holiday, you see those moms like, yeah, the kids are finally, like, they make a joke out of this, how, oh, we're finally sending the kids off. And, and it becomes almost a cruel joke, and so if we are expecting our children to have gratitude, we have to really ask ourselves, are we demonstrating gratitude? And if we have little jokes on social media about how, oh, we finally got rid of the kids, we finally sent them off to the teacher, well, that doesn't set the tone for our children having gratitude, and that might hurt their feelings, to be honest. Because I'm thinking, if we even make jokes, if we make fun of the fact that, oh, well, I can't stand those kids around anymore, I'm so glad everything's over, then how would we feel if someone said, oh, I'm so glad that they're gone out of my house, and I couldn't stand, there was too much for me to handle. We we have to be very, very careful not to empower ourselves to be ungrateful, and to say things that that show that we don't appreciate what we have. We don't have to like every moment. Every mom's and dad is going to confess it's tiring.
Sure.
It's difficult. But do we want to focus on that? Or do we want to focus on the fact that as we grow older, we will have children to help us? Because every single one of us, as we get older, we become more dependent. And there is a scripture in the Bible about being free. I will paraphrase, but you will say something about, there was time that we were able to make up our mind and so forth. But then time will come when we'll depend on someone. I forget now where that was. Is it Proverbs somewhere, or?
Well, no, you're talking about Yeshua speaking with Peter, and he says, when you were younger, you dressed yourself, you went where you wanted, but when the day is coming when someone will determine, he was talking about someone's going to determine how he's going to die.
Right. But there was, yeah. But anyway, I think
That's John chapter 21 you're talking about.
We all find ourselves at a time we feel so free, and sometimes, unfortunately, we feel free of God and the consequences of our choices.
Yeah.
And then one day in our life we become aware, and usually that becomes with the maturing process as we get older. But at the same time, we become aware that not everything is within our control. Not everything is something that we can determine. But what we can determine is our attitude and the gratitude in our heart for the things that are good. Did you find?
Yeah, it says, truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to gird yourself and walk wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will gird you and bring you where you do not wish to go. Now it says, now he said this, he said, signifying the kind of death he would glorify God. But it could also mean that when you become dependent upon other people, they're going to push you around in your wheelchair where you don't necessarily want to go. And so if you haven't fostered those good relationships with your kids, then you're going to end up in a very unpleasant situation.
So no more jokes about how our kids are, like we've got it up to here for our kids.
Yeah.
And that is just, again, this movie we watched is kind of like when the parents weren't walking closely with God, then their children were starting to go off in different directions and getting themselves in trouble and making unwise choices. And really, when we have a sense of gratitude in our heart, then we will be more careful about the choices we make, consider the consequences, and then value and steward what we have. I mean, gratitude just has so many things that branch off.
If you're thankful for every situation in your life, then there's no room for complaining and grumbling. Now, that doesn't mean we have to like what we've got going on, because there's a lot of things that we have to deal with.
And don't be fake.
And, we don't like getting sick, but there may be a blessing that's going to come out of sickness. We don't like adversity, but there's going to be a blessing that will come out of adversity.
Yeah, growth. I mean, many motivational speakers say growth comes out of adversity. Sometimes you wouldn't grow if you're comfortable, and the only way to grow is to become uncomfortable.
When you go to the gym, the only way that you get stronger or faster or more flexible is you push yourself beyond what is comfortable. And what God does with us is he pushes us beyond where we're comfortable in order to help us grow. God allows adversity in our life in order to strengthen us, in order to make us wiser, so that we have things to be able to pass on to other people. And even when we're suffering for our own bad decisions, if we're walking close with God, then he's going to minimize the damage. And I can tell you, there have been many times in my life where I know, had it not been for God's hand of protection, I mean, I had a friend of mine, she says to me, my guardian angel drinks.
Yeah. And you know what, but that comes with also our maturing process.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the frontal lobe, and, over 25 is when that process starts really finalizing.
Right.
But another thing, just as you were speaking about this, how God disciplines us, we recently also were in the car and listening to a sermon about the discipline, and how if we discipline our children, we are taking care of them. We're stewarding them. Like we are trying to get them to be the best, and a lot of people think of discipline as punishment, and that they're not the same thing, because when we discipline, we do it in love. We don't do it in anger. And that is the big difference, and the factor that divides those two concepts. So no, discipline is a good thing. And the Bible also says that discipline is not pleasant for the time.
Nope.
But the purpose of discipline is to create a peaceful fruit of righteousness, is what it says.
Right.
And so just like when we work out in the gym, I'll take your example. We get the body that we want eventually, but it was not a good process and fun process.
When I started doing martial arts, I was 16 years old when I did my first class. And at the time, my teacher, he was in his mid-30s, so he was, of course, in prime shape. And he had a hard class. It was an hour and a half long. I found out years later that there was a beginner class. I never knew about the beginner class. I just I
I
just
tell you, you do everything the hard way. But hey, some of us just learn that way. So just go to the hard
so
course.
so anyway, and so we did about 10 minutes worth of abdominals. And now 10 minutes, if you're sitting on the couch watching TV, isn't a big deal. If you're doing abs for 10 minutes and you're not accustomed to doing abs, my stomach was so sore after that. For a week, I literally could not sit up. When I would get up out of bed in the morning to go to school, I would have to pivot on my elbow to push myself up because my
It
stomach
hurts
muscles,
so much.
it was brutal.
All right.
And
And
then, but I went back, and as I kept doing that, I ended up with a six pack. I had a washboard stomach. Now there's a few extra towels on it, but I had a washboard stomach. That didn't come without pain.
right. And see, and if we listen to people who say, oh, being so strict with a child is cruel. And we have heard of grandparents even saying that to the parents or whatever.
Yeah.
If now again, we have to make sure that what we're doing is the best for the child, not because we are angry or upset with them at the time.
Correct.
But the discipline and which is also connected to disciple, which is the student, someone who's supposed
Right.
the purpose of discipline is to learn. It is to acquire knowledge that is going to make our children do better in life and maneuver through life and not avoid hard work and things like that. So discipline really is an act of love because it takes a lot of energy to set rules, to observe the children, and then to provide the consequences that you've agreed on, and to be consistent. It takes a lot of energy out of the parents.
If you do not discipline your children, you are going to create monsters that
Spoil
will
them,
be,
yeah.
and they will. It actually says if you don't discipline them, if you discipline them, you will save their souls from hell.
Right.
Because how are they going to know true love unless they've got boundaries? If they're allowed to do whatever they want, human nature is such that Jeremiah 29:13 says that, Jeremiah 17 verse 8 says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can understand it? You don't have to teach a kid to be selfish. They figure that one all on their own.
Oh, it's there. But when you're talking about love at the same, because we are now connecting this like gratitude with discipline, with love and all that stuff. And, the whole slogan now that we have, love is love. Well, I mean, we have to really talk about the definition of love.
Yeah.
Because when we talk love is love, most of the context is lust,
Yes.
love. But love, it has boundaries. It absolutely does. Now it is unconditional, but it has boundaries. So because we require of our loved ones things, and not everything that we feel like is out of love, and so we have to check our hearts on that. And just because something feels good, it doesn't mean it's loving.
Yes.
And so we just we're talking here because gratitude really has to do with love. It has to do with love, the one who gave us something, the one who did something for us, appreciation, valuing of that person. There's just so much to that.
Well, it starts with our love for God, and it starts with gratitude toward God, that we have to remember that no matter what's going on in our life, and listen, this is something that I struggle with all the time, is that I always have to remember, and it was God who said this to you one time, that you were kind of fetching about, someone who wasn't a believer had something, and you were saying, well, why is my life suck?
Right. I actually specifically remember it was someone was posting pictures posting picture on social media on vacation, and when you haven't had a vacation in quite a while, you go, oh, well, how come they get to go, and I go to God because I know God is my father, and I've sacrificed things to serve God and to follow in his ways, in the lifestyle that God prescribes in the Bible. And I was really, it's like, God, how come doing the right thing is not as fun and rewarding as this person who's doing whatever he wants and gone on vacations? And God did answer me and said, well, you're preparing yourself for eternity. That's where your true reward lies. In this life, this person's getting their award now. They're getting their good stuff now. But you have to be concerned what waits for you in eternity. And I know that every child at some point in their life has asked, what happens to all these people who die? Like, what happens to us when we die?
Yeah.
Because at some point you start becoming aware that, people are not around forever. And we need to be really concerned about eternity also when we teach our children, when we guide our children, when we discipline them and teach them that gratitude.
Yeah. And so I had a difficult conversation with our son yesterday because he made a comment about something that he had, and it was
He didn't appreciate it wasn't the quality that he was
yeah.
expecting.
And first of all, I rebuked him in front of the other kids because he made this comment publicly. But then I spoke to him later. I said, we worked very hard to get you that. And for
Yeah.
you to be dismissive of that, that just shows you don't appreciate it. And I said, I'm dealing with kids, and I, of course, have a great example because we actually support a ministry over in Uganda of there's an orphanage over there of 360 children. I mean, this is a massive operation, and many times those kids don't even have enough food to eat.
Yeah, they just run out of food pretty quick with 360 kids.
Yeah, I mean, it costs a lot of money. Their budget's like 50 grand a month, or a quarter rather, just to feed and house them. I said to my son, I said, you have this nice, beautiful house that you live in, and despite the fact that we've struggled financially over the years at times, you've always had a roof over your head. You've never gone hungry. You have stuff. I said, you've got your own shower. I said, they don't have a shower. They have to bathe with a bucket.
Yeah. And that's the thing. When we lack gratitude, things start being taken away, because when we lack, it's that then we appreciate the little things a lot more than when we have a lot.
And God will force that issue upon you at times, that if you don't have a grateful attitude for what you have, and part of that, it goes back to what Yeshua said, that if you are faithful in the little things, then you will be trusted with the big. Well, in order to be considered faithful, you have to be grateful for what you have. And it goes back to Philippians 4:4 that says that we are to rejoice in the Lord in all things. And again, I say rejoice. Let your be anxious for nothing, but with everything in prayer and supplication, make your requests known unto God. And the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your heart and mind in Messiah Yeshua. It's one of my favorite verses in all of the New Covenant. And that we are to let our gentle countenance be made known for the Lord, isn't it? Rejoice in him in all things, even when things don't go your way, even when things are bad. So, it's a minor example, but today there was someone who had sent an online donation. And so I went to process it, and the password that she usually uses didn't work. And so I tried it, and it ended up, it said, now you got to go back to her and ask to send it again. So I called her up and I said, this is kind of what happened. She says, well, I might have spelt the password wrong, but I said, I believe that you've been on my heart to call just to kind of check up on you and see how you were doing. I believe this was God prompting me. Yeah. So because he kind of now it's a minor issue, it wasn't
a little
anything,
frustration. No,
it wasn't anything to get upset about, but I thought, okay, so what are you doing? But if we're thankful to God at all times, Romans 8:28 says all things work together for good for those who love God and for whom he has chosen for his purpose. Everything that God does in our lives will eventually work out for good, even the things that are difficult, even the things that are tragic, the loss of a family member, a critical illness.
Yeah.
All these things eventually work out to our good. And
it's we don't lose it in the meantime.
and that's really key. But if we constantly have an attitude of thankfulness, and how do we do that? I mean, practically, what do? We just focus on the fact that we're grateful for what we have. And if you're grateful, there's no room for complaining. There's no room for coveting, wanting what you don't. I mean, why is coveting a sin? Do you know the 10th commandment of the 10 is the only one that isn't an external thing? Don't, only worship God. Don't have any other gods. Don't have idols. Don't use his name in vain. Don't steal. Don't kill. Don't commit adultery. All of those things are external. And then you get to the 10th one. It's like, and don't covet. I could be coveting without anybody knowing about it. I could be looking at what someone else has. Yeah. And there are many things over the years that, I've struggled with. And so that one is the one that's internal. But if we're coveting, that means we're not thankful for what we have.
Yeah.
Paul says, I learned to be thankful for what I have. And, I've had much, I've had little. I've learned to be thankful in all situations.
And we can have the same attitude in all situations. And that would be a really good thing for us to be able to master, because it is a difficult one.
It can
It
be,
is.
Especially when you're getting hammered every which way, and you're not even thankful, or it's tough to be thankful rather for when you're being persecuted.
Yeah.
Blessed are those who are persecuted, for they shall see the kingdom of God.
And so, when we lack gratitude, we do lose what we have. And I think the Lord has spoken to you about the fact that here in North America, we've had a lot. We have been, and just before I get you going on that one, I wanted to say, many times you've heard in sermons being said, what if you tomorrow got the things that you were only the things that you were thankful for today.
Absolutely.
So if anything you were not thankful for, didn't have gratitude for, what if you lost all that and you only had the things you were thankful? How much would you have? And we have to, and that's really always at the back of my mind, because you have to always think, I have to be grateful for what I have, because that's the only way I would keep it. Otherwise I would lose it.
Yep.
And that's how it works. And so that's on a personal scale. Sometimes it could be little things, but you have prayed and the Lord spoke to you about how here in North America, he has given us a lot. There's a reason why all these Europeans came from Europe to come here in North America to settle here. There's resources, there's nature, there's beauty, there's freedom, there was space. They could set up a society that serves them.
It was free, and you have the opportunity to write your own ticket.
Absolutely. So whatever you did, you had to farm, you had to work hard, but that was the opportunity. And so because the people who came here to North America, they worked hard.
Yeah.
And so that's why this society prospered here in North America. Now, the other part of that equation is that a lot of these people also honored God that came here from Europe. And so that was another reason for their blessing. Yeah. And that's why our North American society has been prosperous for so many years. But now we're noticing that we're losing our freedoms. We're losing our financial stability. We're losing all kinds of the services, the public services and all that stuff that we've relied on. And of course, we're not happy about this. We're uncomfortable. A lot of families are starting to become uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, and the verse that the Lord spoke to me, quite often what happens is that God will speak to me through the reading of his word. I won't necessarily...
Well, that's why we have the Bible, to be our guidance.
Right, but he'll highlight something to me. I'll notice something, and then kind of I'll have the impression that I need to zero in on that and start
your situation
and start meditating on it. And the word meditate in Hebrew is actually to mumble. So you kind of start twirling around on your tongue and everything else. But
think of the true meaning of the words that you're reading and what God's telling you through those. Yeah.
But the verse was in Jeremiah 22:21, and God said, I spoke to you in your prosperity, but you said, I will not listen. This has been your practice from your youth. You have not obeyed my voice. The wind will sweep away your shepherds, and your lovers will go into captivity. Then you will be ashamed and humiliated because of your wickedness. And so what God was telling me in this situation is that North America and the North American church has been very prosperous. And what has the focus been on in North America, especially in the United States, is the prosperity gospel. It is that God wants you to be healthy and wealthy now, and he wants you to have your best life now. And, it's
Which
all
goes
about...
against what God spoke to me about the fact that you're not supposed to have your best life right now. You're supposed to think of eternity.
If this is the best life that I'm ever going to have, count me out. I need to go find a different God, because he has told me that eye hasn't seen, ear hasn't heard, nor has the heart discerned the things that are in store for those who love him. In this life, we're going to have tribulation, but we're thankful for that too, because through the tribulation, it's going to build up character. I mean, there's all kinds of earth, and boy, I've preached a number of sermons on that, mainly to me. Quite often those sermons are just like, if anybody was getting anything out of this, that's great, but this sermon's for me, so just hang tight. I've had to remind myself that God does allow tribulation. He even sets up the situation where there's going to be tribulation, because sometimes we have to have the brat beaten out of us.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what it is. When we have no gratitude, we act like a brat because we have sense of entitlement. Well, we are all this.
Yeah.
Why should I be thankful for something that I deserve or I should be given anyway? And so
Yeah.
this is what we're talking about in terms of guiding our children to have the right attitude. But do
Yes.
we have that ourselves?
You cannot teach what you don't model.
And I believe, as we were speaking last night about our education system and how it no longer serves us, well, because we haven't stewarded it.
Yeah.
We have not, families, parents have not been involved. And I know there are a lot of parents who have been involved, but as a percentage of our society, how many parents have been really involved in parent councils?
They walked in, they took over, and now they call the shots. And God bless her. There was a public school trustee that was speaking last night, and she says that it does matter and everything else. Right after I had spoken and said, we're wasting our time because they're not going to listen to us.
Well, and you know what? I think there's still hope in some places. They are. But the thing is, we are working against something much bigger than something a group of parents can change at this time. What we can do, though, is to again be grateful for what we have and stewarded and protected. And our freedom has been one of those things that has been protected. Our our economy, our so many things that we have been given over the years, and we've lost them. And it's really, like you said, it's our fault because maybe we haven't been thankful. We've come to expect that things are going to be well, that we'll come to expect that we'll be able to go on vacations and enjoy good food and to have good homes and all these things. And when you compare that to the kids in Africa, and I know it's almost becomes like, oh, if you don't eat your dinner, I'll give it to those kids in Africa. And I know some kids have their parents like, okay, go ahead, send my plate,
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah,
the thing,
name too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I actually can.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think one of the ways to foster gratitude is to really serve the community, to really help with soup kitchens, food pantries, giving food and something warm to the homeless, and to just, because sometimes we've sheltered our kids from that.
Mm-hmm.
And I, even one of my first teaching jobs, I worked in a small farm community, and a lot of the families there were doing well, and it was a small community, so it was quite sheltered. And I remember I think it was like a grade 8 graduation, and we took the kids to downtown Toronto, for a play or musical
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. And so as the buses were going downtown Toronto, all of a sudden the kids started seeing these homeless people on the street.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't seen that in their community. There was no homeless in
Yeah.
their community. And and of course, the first thing is, oh, look at those hobos, it was a culture clash for them. They didn't realize, but when they saw that and saw those people, that there are people who lack home and food and things, they start thinking, well, could that be me one day? Like, could I be homeless one day? Like, what happens to make somebody homeless?
There's a lot of people who are out on the streets now because of what's been happening with inflation, because of job loss. You've got AI that's starting to replace all kinds of people. Yeah. And this whole chat GPT and all that kind of stuff, that's replacing the white collar workers, university professors and professionals and people who thought that things were secure. But because of our arrogance, because of our lack of gratitude toward God, God is saying, okay, I spoke to you in your prosperity. I kept telling you to come back to me. You did not listen. This has been your way since your youth. And so what God was telling me is, I am taking away the prosperity of Western society.
So you can start thinking carefully about
because of decadence. And there's still an opportunity to repent, but it's quickly disappearing from us. And so in order to change the way that people think and this attitude of entitlement, they have to be forced into a situation where they don't have what they once did.
And that's why you and I have been thankful. Like God really had to teach us how to be thankful for the adversity in our life. But we started because that's when we've developed better attitude, actually, not worse attitude, but better attitude about things.
Well, and ultimately becomes a choice that, you can decide, I'll end with this. There's a story that we were once told that there were two brothers. One was always happy and the other one was always miserable. And so what they decided to do is they put the unhappy one in a room full of presents and everything else. And he was just grumpy about the whole thing. And he's opening up, I don't like this, and this is no good and everything else. And the other one, the one who was always happy, they put him in a room full of horse poop.
Yes.
And they decided to leave them to see what would happen. Well, as I said, the first one, he's complaining, he's not happy. The other one, and he is having the time of his life, and he's digging through and everything else, and they're looking, and so finally they ask him. It's kind of disgusting when you think about it, but he's throwing the poop this, and finally they said, "What are you so happy about?" And he just said, "With all this manure in here, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere."
Trying to find it, the pony.
Yeah. So, and it's an extreme example. But when you start thinking, if I'm upset about something, that means I am lacking in gratitude about something.
Right. And so just a quick advice for families. There's many options, many things to start practicing that, because it's not a natural and comfortable thing. There's suggestions like having gratitude jars, and every day putting a little piece of paper, something you're thankful for that day, gratitude journals, and writing down the same idea, or having times and meeting as a family and chatting about one thing. And I know, like, even in our pod, sometimes I try to ask questions thinking about positive and thinking about themselves positive and others positive, and so often I have to redirect from the negative thoughts that creep in.
There's a lot of self-talk that's negative, and so what we have to do is we have to reprogram ourselves by changing our attitude.
Right.
And so we're thankful for you, and we're thankful that you were with us today.
Yes.
And trust that you'll be back with us next week. So we wish everybody a wonderful week, and keep getting smart.
Yeah, smarten up and be grateful. Have a
great week. Bye-bye.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.